Hi everyone, Emily here, and today I have for you my January wrap up and then my February for sure I'll read, and then some books I'm kind of like I would like to read. I don't know if I'll be able to fit them in though. So, that being said, let's get started with the January wrap up. Just a little warning, I might end up coughing a little bit. It is super cold here in central Illinois. Excuse me. I just went grocery shopping. I have asthma and I'm getting over some nastiness. It's not COVID as far as I'm aware. I did get tested last Saturday. It was negative, but I haven't been sick in 3 years. I somehow managed to have dodged all illnesses for 3 years. So my body's just kind of like, what are you doing to me? At any rate, January wrap up. So January was a little slow month, it feels like, because I only finished 3 books. So that seems really slow compared to December when I had winter break. But I managed to read 2,386 pages because one of those books was a beast, and another book, I'm 60% in and I'm on page 620. So, like, that just kind of skews everything. So, I did finish 3 books. I'm trying to find. I did not tab this. So, I'm trying to find my ratings. Where is it in my planner? At some point in time, I will have a, like, well, crud. Here we go, my reading checklist. At some point in time, I will have like a flip through of my planner throughout the year as I fill it out. I'm thinking of probably doing that quarterly, along when I do like quarterly checkup on my goals. So, the first book that I read in January was Beartown by Fredrik Backman. And so this for me fulfilled like I want to work on reading some books from around the world. This would fit Sweden. This also fit for like the Harry Potter Flourish and Blots reading challenge this year. There was a prompt that was about sports, and this is about hockey. So this is a small town in Sweden, and of course their lives center around hockey. And there is the junior level team made of like 16, 17-year-olds, and they're in the playoffs, and all of like the town's hopes like rest on these boys because the town's economy is dying. So like if the boys win this game, it will mean hopefully economic revival for this town. In the meantime, there's a party and something happens at the party. And check the book for trigger warnings. It actually starts off right up front with a trigger warning. So there's quite a few trigger warnings. So check for trigger warnings. And so something happens at the party, and then that kind of divides the town. And the book is about the fallout of like leading up to the party and then the fallout. This is the first in a trilogy. And I will say this, I gave Beartown 4 stars. And that's kind of generous. I did really enjoy it. It was a fast-paced read. I enjoyed it. I appreciated the social commentary. It was infuriating, the things that were happening, but also what made it infuriating was like, one, not only is this happening, but two, it happens far too often still. Like, why are we still having these conversations about things in 2023 or whenever this book came out? I don't remember, 2016. It's still relevant. Even 7 years after publication date, these conversations are still happening, and it's just infuriating. I do feel like Fredrik, I DNF for Anxious People back in 2021 after 20 pages because I thought he was very condescending in that book. This was not that way, but I do feel like he just kind of beats you over the head with the social commentary at times, which is why I only gave it 4 stars and I didn't give it a 4.5 or a 5 stars. There are times where I felt like you know what? We're intelligent readers. Like, we can figure this out if you show us through the characters' actions, the characters' words, what they're doing, what they're saying, versus giving us this like commentary that's part of the narration. So that's what prevented it from being a 4.5 5-star read. But I did enjoy this enough, I should say, that I want to read and continue on in the series. Then the next book I read was a reread for me. And I read Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. And I read this back when the Amazon Prime show first came out. And I'm glad I reread it because there were things that I picked up on in this reread that I didn't pick up on when I first read it. So, for example, what I just thought was super neat was there's 2 prologues. And the very first prologue, we get our main characters. We get Matt and Rand and Perrin and Egwene, and they're kids in the town, and they all go like, we want a story, and we want a story that involves Trollocs and Aes Sedai and the Dragon Reborn and this and that, and like, so they wanted all these different things and all these different features that related like in their story. And then we get this book, and it's like, you're getting the story that they just asked for in the prologue. So I thought that was a really cool thing that I just did not pick up on for some reason when I first read it. There are times when it gets slow, like around the last couple hundred pages, I was like, okay, can we just get there? Can we just get there? Can we get to the climax? Can we just get there? So that was just a little kind of frustrating. And I think in part that might have been because I started this over winter break, and then I was finishing up, I think, when I had gone back to school. And so I was adjusting back to being back at school. It was stressful because of things at school. And so I would come home, and it was hard for me to engage in reading. So I think that also did not help the book. And that's not the book's fault. It was just that's where I was at in reading it. But I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. And so this is one of the reasons why this book was a slower reading month, because this was 800 pages. Then the next book I read was Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. And this is the first book in the Earthseed duology. And so this is centered in it starts in 2024, I believe, and then ends in 2027. And this follows Lauren Olamina, and she lives like in a walled-in community with her father, her stepfather, her siblings, or I'm sorry, her father, her stepmother, her siblings, and then just some members of her father's congregation. So her father's a preacher, and we're in a post-apocalyptic time. So we're talking total climate change, like everything's a desert. Food is scarce, water is scarce, housing is scarce. You have to pay for your police services and your emergency fire services. You have to, medicine is scarce. If you leave your community, you're running the risk of, pretty much, you're going to get robbed, you're going to get beaten, you're going to get killed. It's awful. And so Lauren's trying to survive in this anarchy, and she also has this condition that makes her feel what other people are feeling. I gave this 4.5 stars. I did enjoy it. And I give it 4.5 stars because when I started reading it, I was fighting the book. I was expecting something more like lyrical sci-fi, more like literary fiction style, and this, it read really super easily. And so I was kind of fighting it because it was written in a style that I was not expecting, and so I was kind of struggling with that. And that's not the book's fault. I've read Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, so I know her writing style. it was my fault because I was putting something on the text that it that wasn't there, and it didn't need to be there. Like, I appreciate the fact that it was very readable and accessible, and that's what I appreciate. Like, I don't want sci-fi of this caliber to be inaccessible for people. Um, so that was my fault, and I will take ownership of that. I'm looking forward to reading the next one. From what I understand, I should add one of the big things. The reason why this is called Earthseed, is she finds she develops this new philosophy or religion. And so we get throughout the novel and the epigraphs at the beginning of each chapter, um, like sayings from the new religion. So sure, her religion is based and centered around change. And that's like the only thing that's constant in life is change, and God is change, and humans are agents of change. They need to be agents of change. So um I do like it. I did like it. I need to read before I so tonight I have a book discussion about this book, and I need to go back and read. There is a foreword by N.K. Jemisin. I'm going to tell you, I started reading the foreword, and there was a spoiler in the foreword. So I had to stop reading it because I didn't want anything to ruin that. So I'm going to go back and read the foreword, and then my text also has a reading group guide, so I'm going to go back and read that before my discussion. So those are the 3 books in January that I started and actually had time to finish. I also I'm halfway between 2 other books. So I started working on Blood Rights by Jim Butcher, which is the 6th book in the Dresden Files. Funny side note, so I bought this book used. I buy a lot of my books used. And it came with this Magic the Gathering book card. Like, someone was reading it and had left it in their book as a bookmark. So I'm now using that as a bookmark to mark my spot. So I'm on page 200. I hope to finish this week. I don't know when because I'm enjoying my next book. But this is a book that I kind of have been reading slowly, like at nighttime before going to bed. And so basically the premise of this is Harry Dresden, he's a wizard, it's urban fantasy, and he's been hired to go undercover on the set of like an adult film. I've been told, like, if you don't like this book, you might not like the rest of Dresden. There are reminiscences of Full Moon in this, but like, I don't really think that's that bad. And there's some revelations about Harry and another character that I am loving, and I want more. Like, I want more of this relationship, and I can't go into it because very spoilery. And I'm sorry about the lighting, folks. I'm really sorry. Then the next book, I'm only 60% of the way through at page 627. And that would be The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. So for sure, I'm going to keep reading this in February. I am loving it. This is, the first book in the Stormlight Archives. I'm working my way through the Cosmere. I am not going, like, I'm going to read all of Mistborn. Like, I've read all of Mistborn Era 1. I'm not going to go, like, read all of Mistborn Era 2, read all of Stormlight Archive, whatever. I'm trying to read in publication order, although I will read out of order when I finally get my physical copy of Trust of the Emerald Sea. I did pre-order that, and I have the digital copy. I struggle with reading digital copies. At any rate, so I'm on page 626. So I'm 62% of the way through this book, and in this, it's about so we're on Roshar, and the Knights Radiant apparently turned against the world. And the Knights Radiant were like the bee's knees, I guess. And I'm still trying to figure out the whole entire magic system. Because in this one, I don't feel like he's beating you over the head like he did in Mistborn, Where Mistborn was very clear, like, we have metal, and certain metals do different things. This one, there's more of a mystery. So, like, things are kind of tied to light, hence Stormlight. And we're following 4 different people. First, we're following our Kaladin. He is our surgeon turned soldier, turned now slave on Bridge, and he is on Bridge 4. Then we have an assassin that we follow, but so far we haven't really gotten too much of him. Then we have Shaylin. She's a scholar. And then we follow Dalinar, who is a prince who is, he's older, and he is wanting to really follow the teachings of an ancient text called Way of Kings. That's the title of our book. I really have been enjoying watching the story unfold. There are a couple of interludes where I'm like, this is irritating. Like, it's taking me out of the story. And that's frustrating because Sanderson doesn't put interludes in there just for no reason. So, like, I'm trying to read the interludes and pay attention, but I'm having a hard time focusing. And I'm like, I know that it's going to come back and tie in. But there are for sure some things already that I'm like, how is this going to play out? And I'm looking forward to figuring out the mystery. There are a couple of characters I'm already like really loving, and I just want more of. And they're side characters. So, yeah, it is a fast read. Like, you think, like, oh my gosh, it's so long. It does read fast. Like, it is not an intense fantasy read like Robin Hobb. Love Robin Hobb. But it does read fast, which is nice. But I'm approaching this as like, read some in this, then read some in another like lighter book, because this is a marathon book, not a sprint book. So that is what I have been reading in January. For sure, I'll continue Blood Rights and Way of Kings into February, probably, because I don't imagine finishing those in 3 days. So now I'm going to talk even more about like what I'm going to read in February. So for sure, I have 2 more books that I'm going to read in February. So for sure, I'm going to read Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And this would fit on like the Harry Potter Flourish and Blots reading challenge. There is a prompt that relates to a natural disaster, and there's a hurricane in here. And this also, I'm going to use this as the United States for my reading around the world, simply because I want to use like a classic that I haven't read, and something that is more diverse in that. But this is about Janie Crawford and her evolving selfhood through 3 marriages and a life marked by poverty, trials, and purpose. That's really all I know. And the reason why I'm reading this is I thought it'd be a great pick to read for Black History Month. And also, I'm part of an online book club. It started off as the Napping Bibliophile. It's a Facebook group, and then there's an offshoot group from that called the Napping Bibliophile Book Club. And we meet the last Sunday of the month at like 7:30 p.m. Central Time. And we have a book that we've been reading all month, and then we meet via Zoom and we discuss that book. So I had suggested, when in December we were talking about what should we read next for the next couple of months, I suggested Parable of the Sower. So of course I had to read that in January. And I also suggested this book. And they decided to go with those 2 books. So of course now I have to read this. So I'm excited because I've heard wonderful things about this. It's been for years I've been like, I really should read this. And it's 193 pages. So it's not a long book. So there's that. And then I'm also going to be buddy reading with Krista over at Books and Jams. I'm going to be reading Ink and Bone by Rachel Kane. And this is the first book in the Great Library series. So there's a funny story about this. So I found book 2, 3, and 4 for pretty much brand new at my used library book sale, of course, because that's where I get a lot of my books. And then she has had this book, and she's had it in unhaul pile, like on several unhaul videos. She's debated putting this up on Pango. And I'm like, do it, do it. And then she's never done it. And finally she said, I'm keeping it. So finally she's like, I'm going to read it. And so we're buddy reading it. So now I for sure have to read this. But this is, I'm going to just read the back. So ruthless and supremely powerful, the great library is now a presence in every major city, governing the flow of knowledge to the masses. Alchemy allows the library to deliver the content of the greatest works of history instantly, but the personal ownership of books is expressly forbidden. Jess Brightwell believes in the value of the library, but the majority of his knowledge comes from illegal books obtained by his family. Jess has been sent to be his family's spy, but his loyalties are tested in the final months of his training to enter the library's service. When his friend inadvertently commits heresy by creating a device that could change the world, Jess discovers that those who control the great library believe knowledge is more valuable than any human life, and soon both heretics and books will burn. So I'm excited to read this. It is intriguing. It's a YA book, so hopefully it'll be a quicker read after I've had some chunkers in January. And I'm excited to be budding reading this with Krista over at Books and Jams. And then the next 3 books, I don't know what I'll get to. I don't know what I'll be in the mood for. So, and here's why. So January, it just has been a wild month. So I had a week, like work has been stressful. I had a week where I was averaging about 3 hours of sleep every night. And I was still going to work because I had just had, it's IEP season and things due. And then I got sick. And so I was just like, I got to slow it down. And I wouldn't, like, normally I stay after to stay caught up on things. And I was just like, I can't do it. So I'm behind at work because I've not been sleeping and I've been sick and I need time to rest. So February is a busy month. I have a lot of IEPs. Like I have a week where it's just meeting after meeting after meeting. So that means more work after work. So we'll see what I get to in reading after I read those 4 books. But I have 3 books that I checked out at the library that I was just like, when I went to the library and I saw them on the shelf, I was like, I need to nab these. So first, this will be great for February because it's just cold and nasty out. Would be Us Against You by Frederick Bachman, which would be the second book in the Beartown trilogy. And it fits nothing for prompt-wise on any kind of challenge that I'm doing. Excuse me. I just thought it would be nice to continue with the story while I have it fresh in my mind. The next book, again, none of these have anything to do with any prompt challenge. I saw them at the library and I was like, I need to nab this. Next one is Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. It's a short book, so hopefully I could read through it quickly. It's like 200-something pages, 234 pages, 235. So it's a quick book. It has been hugely popular on Book Talk and BookTube. I've heard so many good things about her, and I just want to read more. And I did do like a first sentence, like rate books based on their first sentence, which I stole that idea from Sarah over at Sarah Reads. And like that first sentence is like, the first couple of sentences are really pretty cool. So I am hoping that I'll be able to get to this and that I'll like it. And then I also nabbed The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. And I also did this and ranked this, my first sentence challenge video, which I'll post later. So what I understand is this is like a fantasy retelling of Joan of Arc. I could be wrong, but that's kind of how it's been marketed and pitched at to me. I do know Evie over at She Was Only Evie absolutely adores this book. And so I thought, well, let's try it. I've never read anything by him. I do love Joan of Arc. So, side story, I was raised Catholic growing up. And when you're in the eighth grade, as a Catholic, you get confirmed. Um, and when you get confirmed, you take on like a saint's name, and like that's like your patron saint. And you have to do like a research project on them and do a report. And then you get interviewed by a priest and you tell them like about your patron saint and why you picked that patron saint. Well, males, it seems like they had just a lot of options to choose from. Females, we had a little bit less that we knew about. Like, we, we weren't taught a lot of the saints. We just knew like what was in the Bible, which was like Mary or Elizabeth. And like every female in my class was Mary or Elizabeth. I was Joan of Arc. I was the only person that was not Mary or Elizabeth in my eighth grade class. And I picked Joan of Arc because I just thought it was fascinating that she was burned at the stake for witchcraft. Um, so the priest is asking me like, so why did you pick Joan of Arc? I had to find some way to like find a spiritual way to give an answer to that. So that's just kind of like a little side note and like why I'm fascinated with Joan of Arc. Not like there's more to Joan of Arc that makes me fascinated by her. Like the fact that she was in her teens and she leads an army. Like she gets told, like she has a vision from Catherine, the patron saint of France, to like lead the army against England, like to support the King of France. And she does that, and she's a female. And there are for sure power dynamics, feminist patriarchy coming down on her, which is why she was tried and convicted of witchcraft. I mean, basically, if you're a female that is not towing the line of patriarchy back then, you're going to become tried and found guilty of witchcraft. There are also, I'm kind of curious too, like so in order to be canonized in the Catholic Church, you have to have 3 miracles accredited to you. So for Joan of Arc, it was, she had the patron saints spoke to her. She had visions. When she was burned at the stake, a dove flew out of the flames, like her signifying her soul. And then when the executioner, like this is the lore, okay? So I'm not, keep that in mind. This is the lore. When the executioner was going through like the ashes after she died, the executioner found her heart intact. So those are the three miracles accredited to Joan of Arc. So I'm just kind of curious to see like what of the lores of Joan are going to be in this book. So I don't know when I'll get to that. February is a short month, and also February is going to be a stressful month. So I know, just already looking at the first sentence of it, it's going to be more mentally demanding to read that book. And I don't know if I'm going to be in the right headspace in February for The Spear Cuts Through Water. So I hope to get to it. I may not. So that's why that's kind of more possibilities. But Us Against You, Nettle and Bone, the other books for sure I should be able to get to. Anyway, that's it. I've rambled on long enough. Thank you for making it this far. Please like and subscribe. Please let me know what you're reading, what your thoughts are on any of the books that I've read. Thanks. Stay warm.